I have to get my Wi-Fi situation figured out in Rome because it's expired and it was no good anyway. So I'll be doing that this week. My intention is we will meet Saturday at my 6 o'clock UK time, 7 o'clock Rome time. So that would be 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So that's my intention. But in case I had any, but I don't know. I don't see why that's not going to be a possibility. But do check the website just in case anything comes up. Right? I don't have control over Wi-Fi connections. I'm going to do the best I can, get the best service that's available in my neighborhood, all of that. I'll do everything I can. But it's just good to have a backup plan. And that would be check the website in case, I don't get it. Not that I don't get it together in case if there's a Wi-Fi problem. Let's just leave it like that. Okay, so we are going to forge on, my friends, and so we would have done 4 schools when we finished the Yoga Sutras, and not anytime in the near future. But if you're interested just for your own intellectual background of whatever it is you're interested in terms of yoga philosophy, if you're interested in just to complete the series and it won't be a long workshop because the Mimamsa texts are all full of ritualistic detail that we just need to get a tiny sense of it. But if you're interested in maybe I can't imagine it would be more than, I don't know, a couple of sessions on Mimamsa, the Mimamsa Sutra, then let me know. And likewise, then if we do that, the only remaining one will be Vaisheshika. And I can't imagine we'd need more than a session on that. And then then you'd have the 6 schools of Indian philosophy, my friends. It'll be up there on the website. And they're there. And I think it's not a bad idea. If you just sort of dabble with them, you'll pick up so many things in your reading that you just would have just shot over your head. Had you not, especially Mimamsa, there's so much reference to Mimamsa, the ritualists. Look at the Bhagavad Gita. Look at verses right before he introduces Karma Yoga. Or maybe it's right after. He says, don't mix it up with Vedic ritualism. And he goes on about how these Vedic ritualists, Kamatmana, Svargapara, Janma Karma Pala, Prada, they're Kriya Bishesha Bahulam, Bhogeshvarya, they want Bhogeshvarya, they want Aishvarya like Ishvara, they want power and Bhoga. These Vedic ritualists, they're only interested in good birth, right? Kamatmana, their minds are full of karma desires. So, I think, and they're very good philosophers in certain spheres. So I'm going to do it, but at some point, just for my own sense of having all 6 schools up there. But if you're interested, I might be more encouraged if I get signs of interest from your end. So the chapter 4, of the Yoga Sutras, Kevalya Pada. So we start off with the verse we've read already, that these siddhayaha, the cities, jaha, are born. They can be born from samadhi, which is, of course, what Patanjali is interested in, but he says they're also born janma, by birth, aushadhi, herbs, mantra, and tapaha, as well as samadhi. Okay? So you can get mystic powers, and we've discussed it before, but we'll go over it again now because something different comes out every time. You can be a demon. And the great demons of the Indian epics, how did they get so powerful? Well, they did tapaha, some of them, intense austerities. So Janma, birth, would be, you can be born as celestial. The celestials have mystic powers. from our point of view. For them, it's just normal. They just have, I suppose, if you ask an ant, if an ant was aware of some of the things we could do, like swim and all the things we could do, they would probably think we had mystic powers. For us, it's normal. So for the celestials, it's normal, but they are one of the five ways of getting these powers is to do really good karma. Can't just be randomly born as celestial. But do really good karma, and Janma, your next life, you're born as celestial. Remember, it's a temporary birth, but celestials can manifest anywhere they want. They don't touch the ground when they walk. They, I think I've said this before. I'm going to mute you all again. One of the ways of recognizing a celestial, by the way, is they don't blink, which sounds a bit weird. And their feet don't touch the ground. And they have garlands that never fade. Those are the three things that are mentioned anyway. So if you see someone floating above the ground about 3 inches with a non-fading garland and not blinking, do a namaha. Could be a celestial. So that's one way you can say these you're born as a celestial, have them just by dint of that jati. Remember jati, that particular kind of birth. Oshadi, herbs. And of course, the commentators talk about soma, the beverage that was offered to the celestials, and we don't know what it is, and the oldest commentaries don't know what it is. But from the descriptions of preparing soma, we know it was a white fleshy plant with a white fleshy bulb. We know it was crushed, pounded, and we know it was strained. So we know that about it. And there have been so many books written on it and theories about it. Some of them quite, out there, but like that there is, in the Central Asia, there's a cow that eats these kind of mushrooms that would kill a human instantly. But they can eat it, and then their urine has some, the whole book written on this. So the pounding and the straining, according to this book, is really the cow's stomach, and it gets strained through the cow's system, and it comes out, and then the urine can be drunk as an intoxicant. So that's about as far out as you can get. And the assumption, of course, being that the Indians weren't even in India, right? That they entered into India a later time, and therefore they lost awareness of what the soma was, because they came into India and there was no longer that particular kind of mushroom. So all kinds of theories. And so clearly when you have theories that are that, I won't say out there in an impolite way, but they're, should we say, interesting, then clearly that people don't know what it is. So Oshadi, herbs, taken to be soma by the commentaries. Mantra, certain mantras have, the Vedic mantras. So here again, the commentators talk about the Vedic mantras. Because what are you doing when you do the Vedic sacrifice? You're chanting mantras, and then, you want it to rain. So you chant, let's say, for example. So then you're chanting mantras that connected with making it rain. So if your mantras are efficacious, if you chant them perfectly, if you follow all the details of the ritual, it will rain. Gita accepts it. Gita never says, why are you doing these Vedic sacrifices? They don't work. Don't you see it's not raining? No, it never says that. It says the assumption is it will rain. But the Gita is saying, don't do anything, but beginning with the Vedic sacrifice, don't do it for material gains. Do it just out of duty. With no personal desire. That's what karma yoga is. Karmani eva adhikaraste ma paleshu. Do your duty, but don't be attached to the deed. So karma in the early literature, extended to mean all human action, but karma in the earliest period meant the Vedic karma, action pertaining to the Vedic sacrifice. So if you did your Vedic sacrifice, that's a siddhi. If you could make it rain, then that would be a power, wouldn't it? And how is that power being exerted? Through mantra? All right, so those are 3 ways. You can janma by birth, oshadi by herbal or plant, mantra, and then tapaha. That would be the most common, the most common way you find in the Puranic literature. You find either sort of yogis meditating in the forest, and even demons. And remember, Patanjali is not interested in any of it. He says it's only of interest to those whose minds are flowing outward. But you might find more interest, you will find more interest in them in the Hatha tradition, in the Tantrika tradition. They are more interested in these powers. But not Vedanta or yoga and Sankhya are not interested in them. So those are the 5 ways, right? So Siddhayaha, that's plural of Siddhi, Siddhayaha. They are born, Samadhi, and these are the 4 ways. Now, it's just, I find this a little choppy, this chapter. And it jumps to this. A lot of scholars think this chapter was interpolated, inserted later. It could be that you can never prove anything like that. You can never prove it. A case can be made because it just seemed I do find there's these sort of jumps that I can't really bridge myself. Well, at least when I was translating it. It's 10 years now since I wrote this. But so it could be the case that things were stuck in. But there's no way of proving that. So when you read all these sort of, if you read, because it comes from academics, originally, it seeps into popular yogic culture. But when you read stories or you read someone saying, well, this was interpolated, means it was stuck in later. It's just somebody's opinion. You never prove anything like that. Because just because something's choppy doesn't mean to say that means we don't understand the connection with the previous verse. Well, maybe that's our problem. Maybe there's a logic there that we're missing, rather than just saying it was stuck in. But anyway, there is a jump here that the changes in bodily forms in other births, jati antara parinamaha, prakriti apurnat, is due to the filling in by prakriti. Okay, so you die. Okay, so you have your subtle body, and you have karma, and that karma creates a blueprint for the next body. By the way, there may be 10 bodies all waiting. It's not that all your karma gets invested in the next birth. Only in the portion that can fit into that next birth. What if you have conflicting pockets of samskaras that can't fit in the same birth? Maybe you did some amazing stuff and those samskaras are eligible for a celestial birth, and you did some really bestial, awful stuff for a chunk of your life that require a sort of gross, tamasic birth. They can't fit together. So then you might have a celestial birth first, or whichever one comes first. Typically, you get the sense that which would come first, an animal birth or a celestial? I'm not sure there's a rule about that. It could be the case that you go up and then, I can't remember reading anything about it is necessarily the case that you burn up your lower births first and then progress to the celestial birth. Because when your celestial karma finishes, you have to come back down. So there must be some scar. There must be a whole pocket of samskaras that bring you down and determine your next human birth. So it's not the case that you're just going to go up through the species. I mean, generally speaking, that's the sense you get. They go up through the species, but I don't know. I'm not sure that's an absolutism. But I can't think of any reference that says that is necessarily the case. Does it really matter? You have your next birth, you have these pockets of samskaras, there may be a number of births. When you leave this body, there may be a number of births. There may be births from even before this body that haven't been experienced. And then in this birth, you're making a whole bunch more. Anyway, so you have this blueprint, and then Prakriti fills it up. Meaning, you take birth, let's say, in the womb of a dog or the womb of a human, and then Prakriti fills out that body. What the mother nourishes is, she eats, she drinks, and the fluids, all of that sort of then fill out the body of that living entity. In the way the verse puts it, you see there's a jump though, isn't there? You'd have thought this Janmoshadi would have fitted nicely at the end of the last chapter. But the jati antara, the next birth, the change into the next birth, okay, your subtle body now needs to fit into the contours of a new body, right? You die, your Atman is, the subtle body always accompanies the Atman, the same subtle body, but it takes different configurations. Like I don't know, like one of those plastic balloons. You can make it in, those plastic balloons they sell on the beach for kids. And the balloon guy can make it into a dog, can make it into a giraffe, twisting the balloon in different ways. Do you know what I mean? You've seen those? So Prakritis like that. So the next birth, Prakriti then, well, let's use the language of this verse. Apurva, what is it? Prakriti apurat. Because of the filling in of Prakriti, there is the change, parinama, into the jati antara, into the next birth. Prakriti just fills in the gross details. Like an architect has a blueprint for the building, and then the supply merchant, fills it up with bricks and mortar. Right. Now, the nimittam prayojakam, the instrumental cause, the nimitta karana, there's different kinds of causes. There's the instrumental cause. There's the material cause. The material cause is prakriti. So in a pot, the material cause is clay, but the instrumental cause is the stick that's stuck in let's say you want to make a pot. You get your lump of clay and you put the stick in, and that makes the hole, and then the potter is an instrumental cause, but not the material cause. So in logic, there are three causes: the material cause, the instrumental cause, and I can't remember the third one right now. Nimitta karana. It's so interesting. You spend your life studying philosophy, and then as you get older, it evaporates. It just shows you how knowledge is ephemeral, part of the parinama, the ever-changing, unless it can take you to a place beyond change. Knowledge can take you to your Atman, to Bhagavan, then it's performed its function. Then all the details of what are the names of the three causes, they can evaporate. They're useless. They're no good at the moment of death. But if that kind of technical vocabulary knowledge brings you, of course, is the point of jnana, brings you to your Atman, brings you to Bhagavan, then you can take shelter. And then you don't need intellectuality. What do you need? You just need to do your name of Bhagavan. If you forget that, my friends, well, let's just hope you remember it again in the next life. That would be rather unfortunate. So the instrumental cause, it's not the creative. The creative one is Prakriti. That creation comes from Prakriti, the three gunas. But the instrumental cause is Dharma and Adharma. So Dharma and Adharma, we're talking about your next body. So the previous verse says Prakriti fills it up. Well, what guides Prakriti? What is the instrumental cause? Well, it's your Dharma and Adharma. You get a good birth or bad birth. Obviously, all shades of gray in between. We know that. When we say good and bad, we're just looking at the two, and then you fill in all the shades of gray. We don't need to repeat that. It's obvious. So Prakriti is going to fill in the next birth. The material cause is Prakriti, but the instrumental cause is Dharma and Adharma. That's called the nimitta karana. It's aprayojakam. But it pierces the coverings from creation like a farmer, kshetrivat, like a farmer, right? Think about there's a river, and the farmer, so that's the river, that's the material cause. But the farmer channels that water into the fields. He builds little channels that direct the water left, right, and into the field. So he's the instrumental cause of watering his fields through his little channels, but the material cause is the water itself. So what's guiding? So he's creating, there's a nice analogy. Patanjali is giving an analogy, which he doesn't often do. Analogies are given by poets and not so much by philosophers, well, maybe by philosophers too. So he's creating these channels, and the channels are diverting the water in very specific ways. One farmer's field is going to be completely different from the next one because he has different needs and different terrain and growing different vegetables or whatever it might be. So those channels are dharma and adharma. That's what the verse is saying. So dharma and adharma are the nimitta, the instrumental causes that channel Prakriti to fill in, connected to the previous verse, to fill in your next body. So you're going to be filled in as the body of a man, or filled in the body of a woman, little embryo, or filled into a female dog, whatever it is. That's Prakriti. The body's Prakriti. So what's channeling Prakriti such that the Atman is gonna take a dog's body? What's channeling Prakriti such that the Atman's going to take a female human body? That's the nimitta karana, the instrumental cause, which, like the farmer building his little channels, that instrumental cause is dharma and adharma. Does that make is that okay? Does that make a little sense, Clara? You think you got that? Got that. Okay. And number 4. And then he jumps to this, and then there's a jump to the there's a jump to the fact that yogis can manifest multiple minds. I don't get personally. And the commentators, if I don't get something, because when I did my translation, I hugged the commentators. I read. My whole intention was channel the commentators. Channel the commentators. Don't add anything unless unless there's something you need to add to make it so intelligible, and occasionally modern analogies. The commentators didn't comment on these jumps, so I don't know whether they didn't have anything to say or whether they made sense to them. But then there's a jump to nirmana chitani asmita matrat. Created minds are made from ego only. Now you wouldn't know what that meant. This one of so many sutras, you don't know what they mean until the commentators tell you what they mean. So a yogi, the ego of the yogi, can manifest multiple minds, and they can enter bodies and go off and do different things. And then the commentators say, well, are the minds the same if they're coming from the one yogi? And the answer is no, they're not the same, because then they would just be clones. They'd all be doing the same thing. Then what's the point in having multiple minds? The minds are completely doing their own thing, but they're under the central control of the asmita, of the ego of the yogi. So you could manifest, Eric could manifest, and Eric to go do the shopping, and Eric to go do meditation, and Eric to do something else. You could have all these different minds, and they would all be Eric, all under the control of the real Eric. They're not clones, because they're doing independent thing. A clone is doing the same thing. That's a siddhi. Why is it here and not in chapter 3? I don't know. So nirmana chitani asmita matrat, created minds, nirmana chitani, the chittas, are made from ego. And then what I just said, pravriti bhede prayojakam chitam ekam anekesam. There is one mind among the many, which is the director in the different activities of the different bodies. Okay, here he's saying it's the mind. In verse 4, he's saying it's the ego. Doesn't matter whether it's the mind directing the other minds. There is one mind among the many created by the yogas. Prakriti Beda Prayojakam Chitam Ekam. Ekam, there is one, Anekesham, among the many. So here he's saying one of those, there's one central mind. In the previous verse, he says it's ego. We don't need to quibble, but there is a sort of a central controlling function in the yogi, and then that mind can then manifest different minds. There's a famous story of actually the Kapila, the father of Sankhya, Kardama, Kapila, who is considered to be the founder of Sankhya. And he married Devahuti. No, the father of Kapila, Kardama Muni. Kapila is the founder of Sankhya, just like Patanjali yoga is yoga, and Badarayana is Vedanta. Gautama is Buddha. The 6 schools of philosophy associated with particular sage, Rishi, Muni. So Sankhya is associated with Kapila, and his father Kardama married. So the emperor came with his daughter Devahuti, and he said to the great sage, "Would you marry my daughter?" And Kardama said, "Well, I'm a renunciate," and like that. And then he said to Devahuti, "Well, Devahuti, I will marry you on the condition that as soon as you become pregnant, I will take sannyas," which doesn't sound like a very attractive marriage proposal. What do you think? So she's she's a great yogini, and she realizes this is her opportunity to be in the presence of a great enlightened being. So she was also a great being in her own right. So she said yes. So they lived together as ascetics, not but ascetic renunciates, celibate, and performed incredible tapas. And eventually, Kardama then was getting ready to leave. It's been 25 years since I read the story, so if anyone knows it and I get some little details wrong, don't worry. Let's get the point of the story and forgive me. So Devahuti said, but Kardama ji, you promised me a child before you went. He said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "But my body's now so unattractive. I've been doing all this tapas. I'm emaciated." And he said, "Don't worry, through my siddhis, through my powers, I will take care of that." So then these celestial beings came and took her, and they took her into a lake, and her body changed into a beautiful body, and Kardama's body also changed. And then he manifested this palace, a bit like, have you read Autobiography of a Yogi? The Babaji in that, that there was this idea that this is created, that yogis can create these amazing palaces full of gems and jewels. You get that even in modern literature. In Paramahamsa's Autobiography of a Yogi, he makes that claim. Anyway, so it's there in the classical literature. So he created this amazing sort of love nest, essentially. So in they go, and in order to satisfy his wife to give her sexual pleasure, he manifested 9 Kardamas. And each of them was controlled by the mind of the central Kardama, but there were 9, each of them independent. So in other words, it was a story that expresses this city. And she enjoyed with 9 men, but they're all her husband, which sounds like an interesting proposal. I don't know whether that's interesting or not, but there it is in the Puranic literature. And because you're faithful, right? You're with 9 men, but you're faithful to your husband. So it's up to you. You could do what you want with that. So 9, so they enjoyed, and then eventually she gets pregnant, and Kardama says, "Okay, my beloved, you will remember our promise." And he's of course enlightened. She's enlightened. She's seen her Atman, and all of that. And the idea is, of course, she has the child who's now going to, because she's a woman alone in the forest. So then Kapila, the founder of Sankhya, becomes her son. But anyway, the reason I shared the story is an illustration of this siddhi here, that the one mind among the many created, and of course, each of the mind's not just floating about as like a weird mind in some kind of ghostly way. I guess it manifests a body. Yogis can enter into other bodies. We heard that in chapter 3, someone else's body, but I think here the idea it can manifest its own body. Okay. And then we're back to verse 1. From these 5 types of cities, tatra, now we're shooting So we've got all of a sudden, look at this. We've got the 5 kinds of ways of getting siddhi. Then we have 2 verses about Prakriti, how does Prakriti produce the next form? Dharma and Adharma channel Prakriti, channel the 3 gunas, because all forms are made of the 3 gunas, dog forms, human forms. So what's channeling that raw Prakriti, that raw material stuff? What's channeling it into the forms? Dharma and Adharma, right? And what's and so in Dharma and Adharma, it's like the farmer channeling water. And so we'd go from, so that's a jump right there, from 5 kinds of siddhis to how the next body is formed by Prakriti. And then we jump to 2 verses on the idea that the yogi can have multiple minds. And now we're back to the samadhi, tatra dhyanam cha anashayam, that from the 5 ways of getting siddhi, the only one that is free of karma is the one born of dhyana. So the other 4 ways of getting siddhis, you're still making karma. Only when you do samadhi means you're free of the kleshas, right? To get to the stage of samadhi, you've gone through the klesha tanu karana, ashuddhi kshaye. So that type of siddhi, and then of course anyone getting that type of siddhi doesn't want the siddhis, the samadhi ja. But he's saying anyway, that's free of the kleshas. The other 4, if you're getting siddhis because of tapas, that means you have a desire. That's a raga, it's a klesha. All mantras, the Vedic sacrifices is all about desire. Mimamsa, one of the 6 schools, they say only a fool will act without a desire. They're materialists. The Gita takes a hard stand against them. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna. So all the others, right, and Soma and mantra, they're all avidya. They're all reflecting desire of the person using them. So therefore they're creating karma. They're subject to the kleshas and subject to karma shaya. So Patanjali is saying only the from those 5 tatra, from those dhyana jam, born of dhyana, meditation, anasayam, is free of karma. From these 5 types of minds that possess siddhis, the 5 in verse 1, the people doing tapas, people chanting mantras, people taking herbs, and people being born, celestials have desires. They're just very pious. The desires are pious. Only the one born of meditation is without the storehouse of karma. Then this goes, okay, now there's a link to the next verse. Karma ashukla akrishnam yoginaha. The karma of a yogi is neither black nor white. In other words, the yogi doesn't make karma, right? Krishna says, if you act, you act, but you give up desire, you don't make karma. You burn karma. So if you're acting in the world like the yogi, free of the kleshas, aklishta vrittis, Patanjali says right at the beginning, verse 5, vrittayaha, panchatayaha, klishta, aklishta. There are 5 kinds of vrittis, and they're either klishta, coming, subject to the kleshas, ignorance and ego, or they're aklishta. They're not subject to ignorance and desire. And who's that then? Those are the Jivan Muktas. Jivan Muktas are walking around in the world. And their actions are not producing any karma. So the karma of the yogi is neither black nor white. Tribhidam itaresham. Everybody else is threefold. It's either black or white or practically speaking, all of us, a mixture of the 2. So that's tribhidam. Everyone else makes karma, and that he's referring to karma in 3 sorts of ways. Black or white means good, good karma, bad karma, or for the most part, mixed karma. But the yogi is not making any karma. Tataha tadvipaka anugunanam eva abhivyaktir vasananam. Now, in this karma, and all this karma, the activation of only those subliminal impressions that are ready for fruition in the next life occurs. So we've got all of these, let's say we die, let's say we die. Well, let's not say, I mean, we are going to die. So when we die, there's tons, we may experience, Patanjali says, drishta drishta janma vedaniya, some karma that you do in this life, you get the results in this life. So you burn up some karma. But for the most part, our karma is going to lie in storage for a future birth. And here he says, vipaka, our karma will fructify. There's the fructification of a karma only for those that are ready for the next birth. Maybe we have lots of karma. Karma and samskara is the same thing, by the way. Your karma is determined by your actions, and your actions are all recorded as samskaras. So samskaras are memory imprints of actions, and action creates reaction, but that action is recorded as samskara. So there's a connection between your samskara and your karma. Your samskara is just a record of what you did, and that's going to produce fruits. And vasanas is just another term for samskara. And as I recall, the difference between a vasana and samskara is the samskara is kind of active in this life, and vasana is a deep level subconscious. The same thing, the memories, the imprints of actions. But I seem to remember one of the commentators saying the vasanas are those samskaras, like the ones that were active, like what did you have for breakfast this morning? So that memory of what you had for breakfast is samskara. What did you do yesterday? It's samskara. What did you do when you went to school? Samskaras. But a vasana, same samskaras, but from a past life. So you don't really have, unless you're a yogi, yogis can go into their subconscious and pull out past lives. It's one of the siddhis in chapter 3. But for the most part, so vasana is just a latent samskara from a long time, meaning a previous birth. So, and here he's saying there is the abhivyakti, the manifestation of the avasanas, that tad vipaka anu, whose time for fructification is ready. Like seeds that you put, like the cicadas. Remember the cicadas this year in America? So they come out every 17 years and nobody knows why. And then they swarm in the millions. I left the States right before, actually. I left in May. I think they hit. I don't know. I didn't follow up on it. I don't know what there's anybody in the East Coast, how the cicadas were this year. But anyway, the idea is they drop their eggs into the ground and they stay there for 17 years. And nobody knows why 17 years, but let's just connect it to the karma. This verse, when the conditions are right, let's just say that, up to, in this case, 17 years, so whatever conditions are, the scientists haven't discovered them yet, but there's no reason why they won't. They'll discover the conditions under which this number 17 is so specific, and not 16 or 18. So those conditions arise in what we would call 17 years, then the eggs, and then the eggs sort of bear the next generation of cikadas. So karma is like that. Can lie in storage for 17 births, or any amount of time, 100 births. When the conditions are right, they come together with other bits of samskaras that fit together. Because samskara, if you're going to be a cat, you can only have samskaras that are appropriate for a cat body, and the cat's got to live for 10 years. So it's not making new karma because it's not a free agent. So then all the karma, everything it experiences is all the fructification of the past karma. So all that past karma has to fit together into that body of a cat. Might be karma that needs the body of an elephant. Well, that can't fit into the cat body. It's got to lie. It's got to wait. You've heard me say, like planes sitting on a runway, each one waiting for the previous plane to take off. The bodies are all sitting there in storage. Okay, so this verse says that the vasanas, the karma lying in storage, like cicada eggs, abhivyakti, there is the manifestation of those when vipaka, and when the time for their fruition comes to be. Anugunanam. All right, and then he says, Jati deshakala vyavahitanam api, even though when those samskaras, like the 17 years, even though your cat samskaras, you say you're a human and you act, and you're creating lots of different bodies, but let's say one of the bodies that you're creating is a cat body. Not all your karma is going to go into that, but a certain section of it. Now that you're not going to get that, let's say that, well, the commentators say, not me, that cat body may be 100 years away. 100 years, because in the meantime, all this other bodies have to, for whatever reason, they're gonna manifest first, and their corresponding births. All right. So then the question is, in this sutra, Jati deshakala, so birth, country, and time may be different. The cat body that is lying in storage that you need to experience because of whatever karma you did, some small portion of it needs to be accounted for, needs to bear its fruit in the body of a cat. Well, that cat may be jati, it's a different species from you. Desha, it's maybe take birth in a different country. Kala, and a different time, maybe 1,000 years. Api anantara, but there is no difference between, because they're identical, there is an uninterrupted connection between memory and samskara, even though they might be separated by birth, time, and place. So let's say the cat is, the samskaras of the cat lie dormant, then they activate, and then they activate into the mind of a cat. They're really memories. The cat's going to be born with memories that correspond to something that you did 1,000 lives earlier or 1,000 years earlier. And it could be it's a different species, jati, different country, desha, different time. But there is a continual connection, and it's not lost ever. None of your samskaras are lost. You have the samskaras, we all have samskaras every single life. It's just they're covered by tamas. So your future cat body is covered by tamas, but when the time comes for it to manifest, bang, the samskaras activate. And then the memory, the samskaras from the past life now activate in the body, in the mind of the cat, and cause the cat then to exist. The cat's not making new samskaras. The cat then will live, whatever that cluster of samskaras is. Let's say there's 1 million samskaras, and that corresponds to 10 years of a cat life. So those 1 million samskaras that you did as a human that are going to that are appropriately accommodated in the cat's body, the minute the last one is used up, bang, the cat gets hit by a truck. And we say that's death, but it isn't death. It's just burns out the last samskara. Well, it's death of the body. But that cluster of samskaras now is accounted for, finished. And then maybe the next pocket kicks in. Now you need to be a celestial, or now you need to be a frog in a pool. Wherever there's life, there's this Atman. Wherever there's an Atman, then the Atman got into that form. Then the question is, how did it get into that form and not some other form? Well, it's karma. If you accept that whatever is alive, the life force, the difference between chit and achit, a conscious thing and a non-conscious thing, like a stone is achit, and a frog is chit. So what's the difference between something that's alive and something that's not alive? Well, the living thing has a property that the non-living thing doesn't have. You have to say, well, what is it? Well, it's all very well saying it's alive, but what is it that's life? It's actually conscious. It's conscious. So that means it has consciousness. Frog has consciousness, and tree has consciousness, just massively covered by tamas, but it doesn't, it's still. So then the question is, how did that consciousness get into that form? And what's the explanation of that? So then the Indian explanation is karma. So then that karma then, here Patanjali is explaining a little bit about how it works. So karma then, when the time is right, that cluster of samskaras that you did 100 lifetimes ago, Prakriti makes a blueprint, needs a cat body. Remember the previous verse, Prakriti fills in, right? Provides the little tiny bones of the embryo, little whatever the cat embryo is, like bits of flesh or whatever it is, globules of matter, right? Prakriti is filling it in, filling it in, filling it in. I mean, look, okay, you could say, well, the mother's, eating and drinking and that is fine, but that's Prakriti filling it in. And then that body then grows into however long a cat stays in the embryo phase. Let's just make up a number. I don't know, a month, 2 months, 9 months, doesn't matter. Filling in, filling in, filling in. And then out it pops. Now, how long is it going to stay out for? As long as as that number of samskaras, until every single one of them has been accounted for. Cat's not making new ones. It's not a moral agent. It doesn't have the sattva to make a decision. Oh, should I kill the mouse? Should I not kill the mouse? Or is the mouse a living entity like me? Will it suffer? No. You have to be sattvic to. Only humans are moral agents. All other forms are simply burning up their karma. So the minute all of those samskaras from your 100 lifetimes ago, let's say it's you, now your subtle body is sort of compacted into the womb. Prakriti fills in your new body, like the farmer channeling water into the field. Out you come as a cat. You have 1,000,000 samskaras. So there you go, meowing about. And the minute you're, 900,000, 999,999 samskaras that are accounted for, last one, bang. You get hit by a truck. And now you leave that form and Prakriti has to fill in your next form. Okay? And this verse is saying, and it's 100 lifetimes ago, doesn't matter. When tamas is lifted, bang, those samskaras, that memory arises in the mind of the cat. Just when it's covered by tamas, we forget, just like even in this lifetime, you forget where you put your house keys, that's tamas. So all your past lives, likewise covered by tamas, but the minute that the conditions are there, tamas splits apart and those memories surface. That's what this verse is saying. Because they're identical, there is an uninterrupted connection between memory and samskara, even though they might be separated by birth, time, and place. Memory is samskara. Smriti samskara, it's the same thing. And tasam anaditvam, they have no beginning. Anadi, adi is the beginning. Adi Purusha is the name for Bhagavan, the Adi, original being. But anadi, there's no beginning. Why not? Ashisho nityatva, because desire is eternal. So souls are not created. Souls are not created in this these traditions. Can't create a soul. There's no ex nihilo. They'd have a problem with the biblical account of the soul being created. They would say, if it can be created, it can be destroyed. And what's it created from? There's no magic. Something comes from nothing. So the forms of the world are temporary, but they're all coming from Prakriti, which is eternal. The gunas are eternal. So they form these, they ever-changing forms, cycle after cycle. Well, what about the soul? The soul isn't, if you're going to say it's created from what? If you're going to say it's created from God, then they would say, well, that means God now has created himself and put himself into the world of suffering. There are, Kashmir Shaivism actually does say something a little bit like that. That Shiva kind of like enters into the world for Leela, to find his way back to himself. So, you might find something a little bit similar, but you wouldn't find anything that something's created out of nothing. Even as early as the Brihadaranyaka, one of the Upanishadic teachers says, and some say, my son, that the Sat comes from the Asat. But how can that be, my son? How could a Sat come from Asat? It's just dismissed. It's not even considered a proposal that is worthy of a philosophical response. It's ludicrous. So it's immediately dismissed as early as the Brihadaranyaka, and I don't know if it ever surfaces again. The idea of something coming from nothing. If it's nothing, it's nothing. It's existentially, ontologically nothing. Now, of course, the Christian would say, well, God, being God, can do that. And that would be a Christian response. You can't limit God. If God is unlimited, then God can make something come out of nothing. And if you say can't do that, you've limited God now. So the God can, then you can't talk about an unlimited God then. So a Christian would have a way of responding to it, but it's not something that ever was taken seriously by Indian philosophers. Okay? So therefore, they're anaditvam. They have no beginning. The samskaras. So therefore, the soul is considered to be eternal, which creates a different sort of problem. If you ask the why question, why are we here? Well, then Patanjali says in verse 218, you're here for either Bhoga or Apavarga. I'm going to put some lights on. I don't know if you can see this. Beautiful, beautiful. My cousin's, Sheila has this amazing place just right out. So, maybe tomorrow, and I should have shown you early. There's just this beautiful valley right in front, right outside of Rome. I'm house sitting. So if you say the why question, why are we here, right? So if you're not created, then the only option is you've always been here. So that's the meaning of Sat. Sat means you've always been here. So then the question comes, well, if I've always been here, that means I didn't really do anything to get here. Then that sounds that's hard for us because we think in terms of cause and effect. Like if you say why I'm here, why am I here? Well, the effect, I'm here. That's my effect. What was the cause? What was the cause of my being here? My being here is the effect, and we can only function as human beings in the material world. Science can only function. Philosophy can only function. Theology can only function under the parameters of cause and effect, because you see the effect and you speculate about the cause. That's what science does. That's what's the basis of science. You observe something, and then you say, well, what's the cause? And philosophy likewise. So our human brains have no way of navigating or a proposal that there's no cause. Because if you say something is eternal, it has no cause. If it had a cause, then that cause would have kicked in and it would have had a finite point of origin. At some finite time, there was a cause, and then the effect is here we are in samsara. But if you say something's causeless, no cause, then that means that means that there no cause means eternal. And we can't understand that. So anywhere you go with that question, you're gonna be dissatisfied. If you say we've been here eternally and there's no cause, we didn't actually do anything bad, like steal an apple when God told us not to, and we eat the apple, that's a cause. You could take it literally, or you could take it metaphorically, meaning we did something, we disobeyed God, and down we came. So there's something satisfying about that, in a certain sense. Now, the Indian mind doesn't find it satisfying because they would say, well, the kingdom of God is perfect. Why would Adam disobey God? God is a perfect being. He'd just be all eternity enraptured by the beauty and wonders of God. There'd be no question of less when God's not looking, let's have a little nibble of an apple. There'd be no question of that. That makes no sense at all from the Indian point of view of perfection. So either way you go with that question, you're not gonna have so this is one of the questions, my opinion, that cannot be answered by the rational mind, by human reason. Why are we here? Or not? No, you cannot. Partly, we're here to seek liberation, right. Patanjali says Bhoga Pavarga. He gives a little bit of an answer in 218, but it's not a why were we here in the first place? If you extend the question to why are we here in the first place, you won't get an answer. So, but this verse is saying, but anyway, we're here eternally because desires are eternal. Now, anadi, by the way, the word is anadi, beginningless. Look at it. See in the middle here? The word anadi. Anadi means beginning. From means the state of beginning, and no beginning. So we have no beginning, but that's not the, but we can have an end. Not we, the Atman, but samsara can have an end. So samsara has no beginning. I'm dissatisfying proposal, but that would be considered better. The worst of two evils. If you were going to say you fell out of Brahman, which is the Indian equivalent of the kingdom of God, call it Brahman. The Atman left Brahman. No, Brahman is 100% perfect, not 99.999. There's no question of falling out of Brahman. So that option is philosophically untenable. So there's no falling from the Garden of Eden or any equivalent Hindu analog to that. So if you didn't fall, then you're always here, and that's not satisfying either, because then you think, well, what the hell did I do? Why should I be stuck here when I didn't do anything originally? I didn't do some primordial deed, dastardly deed. So that's not satisfying either. Therefore, the human mind cannot answer that question. And the Buddha put it very well. He said, so anadi, beginningless, but that doesn't mean it can't have an end. And the Buddha put it very well. If someone shoots you with an arrow, you're dying. There's no point saying, well, what was what kind of wood is this arrow made of? Who was the craftsman? What village did he live in? What caste was he? That's not a useful question. Better to say, how can I take the arrow out and heal? So we do not know. There's no Indian philosophical system, and the Indians would say there's no Christian or Jewish or biblical or any other, from their point of view, there's no other satisfying answer to that question. So therefore, we don't know why in terms of the, primordial why. We know why we're here in this life because of stuff we did in the last life. But what about that last life? Well, this life before, we end up in an infinite regress. We don't know what the primordial, there was no primordial number one beginning Big Bang life. So therefore we can't wrap our minds around that, but we can use our minds to try to figure out how do we get out. And of course, that would be yoga. So verse 10, all of that, stick it into this verse. So dasam, the samskaras, anaditvam, they have no adi, no beginning. Adi is the beginning. An is a negator. Why? Because ashisho is another word for raga. The ragas are nityatva, they're eternal. So these samskaras, so this section kind of holds together pretty well. I'm just puzzled at the beginning for the reasons I already mentioned. There seems to be two big jumps from my point of view. There's a jump between the siddhis are obtained in 5 ways, which, if my student wrote a paper and did this, I would tell them that put that in the end of chapter 3. What are you sticking it here for? Right? And then we have this idea, these 2 verses about Prakriti filling in the next birth. There's a big jump with no link. What has this got to do with siddhis? And then we have this other jump here about this mind, that the one mind, I would have told my student, stick that in chapter 3 as one of the siddhis. All right, one mind's controlling the others. And then we go back to samadhi. We jump again back to samadhi, that only the siddhis born of samadhi, dhyana, is free from the kleshas, not the other ones, the other 4. And then we got now it, and then it seems to flow from there. We got karma is black, white, and mixed. Oh, the yogi doesn't have any. And then we have, well, and it's activated when the conditions are in place. And it doesn't matter if the country and the birth and the time is different. There's an absolute correlation between memory and the samskaras manifest, because the samskaras are memories manifesting in the future life. And these samskaras are eternal because desire is eternal. As long as you desire, you act to fulfill your desires, and that creates karma. And of course, when you act, everything you do is imprinted. All your actions are imprinted. Everything you see, hear, smell. It's just we remember the ones that are most significant. But actually, everything is being recorded in our chittas. Okay, everybody. So chapter verse 10. Onward we go.
Pardon me, are you stopping in an hour?
Yeah, I think I probably should. Thank you, Eleonora. So therefore, everybody, I'm going to log out because we've had trouble sending anything more than an hour. WeTransfer won't take it. So to avoid that, I'm going to log out. You're all going to get disconnected and give me 30 seconds and connect straight back in. Okay? Thank you. And when they'll be sliced together, they'll be put back together by Sarangji, who puts them up on the website. The great soul. He's a great soul. If you ever meet him, make sure you do a full namaha, like a dandavat, straight on the ground, like this. He's a great sage. Great soul, Sarangji. Record to this computer. Thank you all for this.
And we can see you.
There we are.
We saw the screen, but not you.
Okay, I was just doing you a favor, Eleonora, but here we are. And we'll look at the text instead. Okay, now, the samskars are held together by hetu, phala, ashraya, alambhana, sangrihita, tvad, esham abhave, tat abhava, like that. So what is the samskara? What is it? So basically you have an object of desire and you act. So the hetu is it's the cause of creating a samskara. You act to fulfill some desire, and either you act dharmically. They always say dharma, adharma, meaning you act in a particular sort of way. And you act to get a fruit, the immediate cause. Then there's a motive, right? That you want to enjoy that fruit. Let's say it's an ice cream. And there's not, and I don't know if that would be dharmic or adharmic. It all depends. So you've got your ice cream. You have a desire to obtain the ice cream. The ashraya is the mind. It's all going on in the mind. And the alambana, the alambana is the ice cream. The alambana is the actual object. The ashraya it's in the mind. The mind is, all this is going on in the mind. The phala is the desire, and the hetu is the dharma or adharma. You can obtain that ice cream in a dharmic way or a non-dharmic way. You could steal it. That's a silly example. Or you could, pay for it and share it with a person in need. So that would be a simplistic dharma, right? So that would be the hetu. Well, all of those together are how samskaras are created. There is an object, a desire to obtain the object. It's going on in the ashraya, which is another name for the mind. It's been used elsewhere in the sutta. Phala is the fruit. And remember, Krishna says phala. Remember the word phala in the Gita? Karmani eva dikara se ma phala, ma paleshu kadachana. Krishna says you can do your dharma, but don't be attached to the fruit. So this is just saying how it all fits together. So when these are absent, when desire is absent, when you don't entertain an object of desire in the mind, you don't entertain it, there's no desire for it. So when all those are absent, esha bhave tadabhava, samskaras cease. Meaning that now we're heading towards liberation some sort of way. Okay? So we have to get rid of desire as the essential So the samskaras are held together by immediate cause, which is dharma or not dharma. At least that's what the commentators say. I find it a tiny bit puzzling, but it doesn't matter. Commentators is what we are following. The motive, why do you want it? The mind, it's all going in the object of awareness, the very object, the thing itself. That is going to be the samskara of a thing. Samskara is a record of a thing. In the mind, your desire to obtain it, and whether you go about that in a dharmic or an adharmic way. Now we jump again a little bit. Let's see what you think. Atita and agatam svarupata asti. The past and the future exist in their own, they have an essence. Advabedad dharmanam. They differ from the present in terms of the manifestation of their characteristics. So past and future, in other words, what is he saying? Everything's the gunas. The past exists in the gunas are real. They have substance. So there's not Advaita Vedanta where it's all unreal. No, Sankhya is not that. Yoga is not Advaita Vedanta. So the past exists because let's say the past was a particular, let's say there's a tree and the tree dies and it goes back into the earth. What is that really from a point of view, from the ultimate ontology of Sankhya? It just, the gunas that were the tree dissolve back and those gunas take some other form. So the tree actually is real. It's real. It's just that it's real insofar as it's made of the gunas, and the gunas are real. And likewise, the future, some other tree is going to come up. It's not come up yet, but it's real because it actually exists within the gunas. And when the time is right, those gunas will manifest the next tree. So that's what he's saying. The past and the present are real because their essence is the gunas, and the gunas are real. So all the past, the past is present is present in the gunas, and the future is present in the gunas. It's just the future, the gunas haven't manifest that future yet, and the past has dissolved into the gunas, but it exists in the gunas. That's what he is saying. The past and the future exist in reality since they differ from the present only in terms of the manifestation of their characteristics. So the tree, the characteristics of the tree, the guna taking the characteristic, the form of a tree existed, and the future tree hasn't come to be yet, but they're real. And what's the difference then in the present? They just haven't, the time of manifestation. The past tree it manifests in the past. The future tree has yet to manifest, but they're both real. They exist in reality. And why are they real? Because the gunas are eternally real, and therefore all of their products are kind of contained within them. Sometimes they manifest, sometimes they've yet to manifest, sometimes they were manifest and then dissolve back into the gunas. But it doesn't matter. The stuff from which the past was made remains, because that stuff is ultimately guna stuff. And the future is real because the stuff of the future is really the gunas. So this is contra Advaita Vedanta. So the te vyakta sukshma gunatmana, the past, present, and future have the gunas as their essence, and either manifest or latent. The present is manifest, the past is latent. It's gone, it was, and it's gone now, merged back into Prakriti. Future is also latent in a different sort of way. It's still, the gunas have yet to manifest that future. So parinama ekatvad vastu tattva. The things of the world are real. So I don't know whether, for me, this is a directed, this is certainly relevant. It's certainly, okay, Advaita Vedanta comes after this. Advaita Vedanta, or at least Shankara's version of it, is 8th to 9th century. Where the world is Maya, it's unreal. So this is before that, but there would have been earlier forms of what later becomes systematized as Advaita Vedanta by Shankara, the great Vedantin. There would have been earlier forms. We know there were earlier forms because Shankara himself mentions previous Vedantins, lists of them. What the Upanishads list teaches. So there would have been this idea that the world is not real. It's a superimposition. Okay, a superimposition of an illusion superimposed, right? We've spoken about this before. When you want to do trick photography, what do? You don't want to put a ghost in a room. You take a picture of a person and you take a separate picture of the room. And then if you're a clever photographer, you superimpose the person floating in the air of the room. So that's what the world is in Advaita Vedanta. It's a superimposition. There's all kinds of problems with saying that, because where does the superimposition come from? In the photography example, there is a real man and a real room. You're just putting them together, but they're both real. You're just putting them together inappropriately. So if you're going to say the world out there is a projection, what's the original? A projection means a mental. Well, what's the original samskara? That projection, which is imprinted in the mind as a samskara and then inappropriately projected onto the world. Where did it come from? You can only imagine a world if there is some kind of a real world, and then you imagine it in the wrong time and the wrong place. That's fine. That's a different sort of thing. But where does the original idea of a world come from? Unless there's you can only project something that's real, but it's real somewhere else. So Advaita Vedanta Ramanuja spends 100 pages, a fifth of his entire Vedanta Sutra. Ramanuja is the 11th, 12th theologian of the Guruji Iyengar Krishnamacharya tradition. And he spends a fifth of his commentary rebutting Advaita Vedanta, at least on that aspect of it. He accepts other things, and Shankara is a great philosopher, no question. But the idea that Jagat Mityam, Brahman Satyam, that the world is false and it's a projection, you can only project something that exists somewhere else. That's one of many arguments, by the way. But this verse, for me, obviously it's before Shankara, so we can't say it's a rebuttal of Shankara, but it must be a rebuttal. He wouldn't put it in here. You don't put stuff in a sutra just randomly. Whenever you have these philosophical points, it's responding to another point of view. We may have lost what that another point of view was. We don't no longer know who Patanjali, who he's referring to, but he's making a point. The gunas are real. Why is he saying that? Well, because Shankara later on says the gunas are not real, and there would have been earlier expressions of that, and that's my speculation. But there must be someone out there. Why is he making this point? The past, present, and future have the gunas as their essence. So definitely, the Buddhists don't accept any essences at all. Actually, this could be against Buddhism, because actually he's going to go on to now rebut. Yeah, this must be against Vijnanavad Buddhism. The next verses are against Vijnanavad Buddhism. Vijnanavad means there was a school of Buddhism that the world is unreal. Different from Advaita Vedanta in some ways. And Vijnanavad Buddhism was rejected by the other Buddhist schools. Eventually, it disappeared from India anyway, but it just sort of went east. That the world, the Vijnanavad Buddhism are there's realism and idealism in philosophy. Idealism is the world is just an idea; it's not really out there. And so the Vijnanavad Buddhists, in other words, you're projecting the world. And so yes, that's who he's talking about. Sorry, not Advaita Vedanta, because and why would I say that? Because he goes on to very specifically argue against the Vijnanavad Buddhism, and it's interesting because Patanjali doesn't argue against other schools. He lets the other traditions do that. Vedanta does that, Nyaya, the other Vedic traditions. This is the only tradition he actually responds to. So it must have been quite prominent at the time Patanjali was composing his sutras, because he's not really engaging opposing points of view like other schools do. His is just, Chittavritti Nirodha is giving a manual for practice. So let's see some of these arguments against Vijnanavad Buddhism. The first thing he wants to say is the world out there is real. Starts with 12. The past and future exist in reality. Svarupa. They're not they don't exist in your mind. And you're projecting it because see the Svarupa here? Just like what do you do yoga? Yoga Anushasanam tada drashtu Svarupa. The sea abides in its own nature, that eternal nature. So the past and the present, they Svarupa. They have their essence. Buddhists do not accept any essences. Everything's momentary. If everything's momentary, there's no essence. An essence is something that survives, that continues. Buddhist, everything is kshanika, momentary, doesn't last more than a moment. So the big thing in Buddhism is, big argument that unites many Buddhist schools, nothing has they wouldn't say svarupa, they would say svabhava. Nothing has its own essence. So this now is a response to that, a rebuttal of that. And you'd have to infer that there must have been a lot of them around in Patanjali's environment. So the past and present have the gunas as their essence, and therefore, right? So they have an essence. So the things of the world are real, vastu tattvam. They have real tattvam. Tat means that. They have thatness, not thisness. If you're projecting the world from your mind, then that world is this. It's a projection of this, your mind. It's from this you're projecting the world. Patanjali is saying, no, that. It has thatness. Doesn't matter whether you're looking at it or not. Doesn't matter whether you're perceiving it or not. Eliminate the human race. Eliminate all observers. The world still has thatness. It's still real. If there's no observer, it's still real. The realists, right? Most philosophers are realists. All philosophers are realists. The only, usually the philosopher in the West that's sort of picked out as different from Vijnanavad, but the Western famous idealist is Bishop Berkeley. And Bishop Berkeley said everything is in the mind of God. It's not objectively real. So he's the sort of, when you look up idealism in Western philosophy, Bishop Berkeley's name will come up on Wiki. But if you put out in idealism and Indian philosophy, then the Vijnanavad Buddhists would come, and maybe Advaita Vedanta. But they're kind of different. Okay, so that's not Sankhya. Real world, real practice. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at it or not. So there, the change, parinama, there is change in the world, but it's a change of one substance. The things of the world are objectively real. Well, let's go to the previous one. The past, present, and future have the gunas as their essence, right? So we just did that, right? So, but they're real. They have an essence, but they're either manifest or latent. Something can be real but not manifest. Or something could be real but not latent. That's a different thing. To say it's not manifest and not latent doesn't mean to say it's not real. It's real, but it manifests when the time is right. So your memory of what you had for breakfast is real, but it's not manifest right now. But if I say, what did you have for breakfast? Well, it's manifest, but it was really there, that memory. So the fact that something's not manifest does not make it unreal. So the next verse then, the things of the world are objectively real due to the uniformity of all change. So parinama, so there's change, but the uniformity means the gunas, all change is coming from the gunas. Just like all color is coming from red, yellow, and blue. All color, the whole universe, trillions of infinity of colors. You can keep changing the proportionality. So all of this world is real. It may be manifest, things die, they go back to the gunas are real, they're supporting and underpinning them, the three, they're ever changing. Krishna says they're competing. Now sattva is dominating rajas, now rajas is dominating tamas. All forms and mental and psyches, they're nothing other than the gunas, and the gunas are real. Okay, that's hopefully that point's made. When we go, so now, Vastu samye chitta bheda tayor vibhaktaha pantaha. Because there's a multiplicity of minds, but the object remains consistent, there must be a difference in nature between the object and the mind. This is directly against Vijnanavad Buddhism. Vastu samye, there is the oneness of the thing out there, the tree and my garden. Let's say a vastu is the thing, an object. The sameness of the object, even though the chitta bhedat, the tayor, so there is this oneness, even though, right, there's a multiplicity because of the difference of the minds, but there's still one thing, you know, but there's a difference in nature. So there must be, Tayor, there must be a difference between the mind and the thing. Right? What's he saying? If the world's a mental projection, how come you're projecting the same world then? If the world was a mental projection, I'd be projecting my world, you'd be projecting your world. Why would we be projecting the same world? And millions of people projecting the same world. If it's an ideal, it's fine for Berkeley to say that because there's one God and he's doing the whole thing. That works a little bit better, perhaps. Perhaps. I don't know. I haven't studied Berkeley. But if you're going to say that everyone is projecting the world, well, why would they be projecting the same thing? So he's saying because the thing remains the same, even though there are many minds, right? We all, let's say 10 of us, let's say our whole group here, right? 47 of us, we sit in my garden and we all see the same tree. Now, if that tree is a mental construct, and we're all seeing the same tree. So he's saying the thing remains the same, even though there's loads of different minds looking at it. Therefore, it cannot be a mental construct. Okay? This is the argument against Vijnanavad. They would say something about karma brings us all together, and because of karma, but Vijnanavad didn't last very long, even within Buddhism. The other Buddhist traditions rebutted Vijnanavada. So the Hindus did, of course, but the Buddhists did themselves. And this is one of the reasons why. Why is it that the Vastu Samye, that there's a sameness of the object, even though there are differences of mind? Therefore, there must be a difference between the object and the mind. The object must be real and independent of the mind. Okay, point taken. Moving on. Okay. Yes, are we good, David? Do you get that? Should we move on? Sky, you sick of that point? Okay. An object is not dependent on a single mind, right? Like the Vijnanavad Buddhists would say. If it were, then what happens to it when it's not perceived? Nacha eka chitta tantram vastu. It's not dependent on one mind. But if that were the case, a pramanakam tada kim syat. Kim syat. Hey, kim syat. If that world is a projection of my mind, right, here I am, I'm looking out the window. Now I'm going to look back here, but the world doesn't exist then. Oh, now it exists. Now it doesn't exist. That's what he's saying. If you want to say the world is a mental projections, okay, now I'm projecting it. Now what? Now I'm looking over here. I'm projecting over here. What happened to the world out there? Is there no tree in my garden anymore? That's what he's saying. And Buddhists would have said that too against their own fellow Buddhist Vijnanavadas. So an object's not dependent on a single mind. If it were, what happens to it when it's not perceived by that mind? Does it cease to exist? Kim syat. I love this. Tada kim syat. What would it be? So now we get the Sankhya position. Right? That's the Purva-paksha, opposing point of view. Tad uparaga pekshitvat chitasya vastu gnata agnatam. A thing is known or not known, not because it's a mental projection, but it's because it's really there. So it's known or not known, depending on whether the mind is, what he says, colored by it. If the mind flows towards the tree, right, it's rangita, my mind stuff, my chitta stuff, flowing through my senses, right, and it takes the contours of the tree, produces a samskara, which it relates to consciousness. Consciousness now becomes aware of the reflection of the tree in the mind. So therefore, a thing is known. It's not produced by the mind, but it's known if the mind. The word is rangita, I think. Let's have a look. What's the word? Raga. Uparaga pekshitvat. Whether it's noticed by the mind. If it's noticed by the mind, right? If I'm not looking at the tree, then I'm not looking at the tree. But the tree is still there. And then it is gnatam or agnatam. That tree is known or not known. Not because it's a mental projection, Look at the gnata, agnatam together, it's a compound. But the thing, the vastu, is known or not known, depending on whether the mind is focused on it or not. Quite straightforward. Now, so he's done with the Vijnanavadins. So, Siddhagnatas chittavritayas tad prabho purushasya aparinamitvat, the always known, the chittavrittis. We know what chittavrittis are. Here they are, chittavrittayaha. They're always known by the Prabhu, their master. Purushasya, because the soul never changes. The Atman is, consciousness is eternal. Doesn't go to sleep. Consciousness always knows, because it's eternal. Its consciousness is eternally, until it's liberated, is eternally, from beginningless time, the previous verse, it's continually absorbed in the mind. It is the master. The mind can do nothing without consciousness, like software. Why is it called a master, Prabhu? What software in computer is useless unless there's an observer. You could have the fanciest software, whatever, some military software, but it's useless unless somebody's observing it and using it. So, and consciousness does not go to sleep. So because eternal, chitti shakti, doesn't switch off. You can't switch it off. It's not, just like the light of the sun, you can't switch it off. If the sun is covered by a cloud, the sun is not actually covered, but the cloud gets in the way. So the mind is always, so consciousness does not contact the sense objects directly. If there wasn't a mind, consciousness would know the whole, every atom in the universe. And as a matter of fact, that's what Patanjali says in verse number 3. You can bypass the mind. But most of us are trapped by our karma. Karmically, we're not eligible to be omniscient. So we're blocked by our minds. And the ant is blocked by the ant mind, and the elephant by the elephant mind, and the tree by the tree. It's the same chitta. That tree was a human. So that chitta blocks the actual omnipresent potential of consciousness. Just like the light of my light bulb here could pervade the whole universe if these walls weren't here. Light will travel. That's what we talk about, light from the Big Bang. If there's no atmospheric obstruction or obstructions, light just travels. If light can do that, what to speak of consciousness, the most subtle of all things? So therefore, right in the Upanishads, it says, it doesn't say Satchid Ananda. It doesn't say that in the Upanishads. It says Satyam Jnanam Anantam. Anantam. Consciousness is infinite. But its infinite potential is blocked by the mind. So consciousness is always absorbed in the mind. The mind goes into deep sleep, not consciousness. So you wake up and you have no memory, because deep sleep is when tamas, dream sleep, is still rajas there, stirring up some skaras, and you have dreams. So that's REM, I think. And non-REM, non-rapid eye movement, so that's deep sleep. So non-REM is, tamas has covered the mind, but that's not, consciousness is not in some non-REM state. Of course it's not. It's chitti shakti. It's eternally. It's sat. It's sat. What does sat mean? It's always chit. It's sat chit ananda. It's always chit. So sat, if deep sleep, it's still a chit. So therefore, consciousness is the master, because Prakriti in and of itself, it doesn't know anything. It has no awareness to allow it to be aware. Prakriti is dead. Okay, that's all he's saying here. So let's look at it again. So the permutations of the mind, the chitta vrittis, are always known to the Purusha. Sadagnatas, they're always known by the Prabhu, the Purusha. Why? Because the Purusha is aparinamitvat. It's not changing. If it was aware 1 minute and then it not aware the next minute, it's just changed, hasn't it? If something's unchanging, which is what sat means, then that eliminates the possibility that 1 minute it's aware and then next minute it's not aware, and now it's in deep. No, the mind is going through those kinds of changes, not the Atman. Is that clear? Otherwise Sat becomes meaningless. So what is Sat? The Chit is Sat. Sat Chit. Chitti Shakti is Sat. And then you throw in Ananda for good measure. But it's Sat and it's Chit. The Chit is Sat. Consciousness is eternal. And the mind is changing. The next thing is the opponent says, well, why do we need an Atman then? Let the mind know itself. Let the mind be the conscious one. Na tatsva bhasam drishyatvat. So the opponent says, okay, why do you need an Atman then to illuminate the mind? What if, let's make the mind itself luminous? This is the Purva Paksha. It's what philosophers do. They have their position and they say, well, what if you say this? And it may be that they're making, usually somebody is saying that. And so the Purva Paksha, the opposing point of view, well, what? Okay, fair enough, world is real, but why do you need to have two things, mind and consciousness? Well, that's the more, and Indian philosophy is the same, and Western philosophy, you know, Occam's razor, the less categories you have, the better is your explanation. Because if you say, well, if this, and 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 if this, then your then is pretty flaky. It's based on a dozen ifs. So the less the less, the less ingredients you have, the simpler your explanation. In Sanskrit, it's called lagutva. In Western philosophy, it's called Occam's razor. The less categories you have, the better your explanation. So the opponent says, why do you need two things, a mind and an Atman? It's unnecessarily complex. Let the mind itself be self-luminous. Let it be aware. Why do you need an other source of awareness beyond it called an Atman? Toss out the Atman. Let the mind be, the opponent says, svabhasam is the word, is it? Hang on. Yeah, svabhasam. And Patanjali says, no. Na tat svabhasam. Why? Drishyatva, because it's observed. That you can observe your mind. You can observe your anger. Therefore, who's the observer then? He's saying the mind can't be self-manifest because it's observed by something else. You're conscious of your mind. So he eliminates that argument. Everybody good? Yeah, Marge? Okay. Dalisa, good? You hanging in there? Okay. And Larry too? Larry, you're all right? Larry Doley? All right, on we go. On we go, on with my friends. Eka, oh God, these are all complicated anti-Buddhist argument now. Eka samaye cha ubhaya anavadharanam. Okay. Buddhists are going to say everything's momentary. That lasts for a kshana. Patanjali's going to say if everything was momentary, you could not have self-awareness and object awareness at the same time. That would require two moments, two kshanas. Moment to be, you can't have two, right? When you're self-aware for that moment, or if you're object aware, you're only object aware for a second, and then the next second, and the next second, and the next second, there'd be no time for you to be self-aware. When you were self-aware, you couldn't be object aware because everything, your consciousness only lasts for one kshana. If you want to disprove Buddhism, all you have to do is say there must be two kshanas. Just like if you want to rebut the Advaita Vedanta, you just have to say, well, what is Maya? If it's real, then you have two things, Brahman and Maya. If it's not real, what the hell is it then? So that's how the Vedantins attack Advaita Vedanta. All you have to do is to show two things. And then it's not a Dvaita, it's now Dvaita. So likewise, if you're going to debate Buddhism, Kshanikavada, which means momentariness, sometimes they don't call them Buddhists, they call them the Kshanikavadins, those who believe in momentariness. So if you want to believe everything is momentary, then there's various ways you do it. One is you say memory, because if your memory is, you would have no memory if everything was momentary. Momentary means that I, the person who saw that yesterday, I'm using the language of Vedanta, I, the person that saw the tree yesterday, the fact that today I see that tree and I say that was the tree I saw yesterday, to explain memory, there has to be a continuum. It can't just have lasted a second. There'd be no memory. One kshana would be replaced by the next kshana, and the next kshana there'd be no I, because the minute you were aware of I, you couldn't be aware of I and the world the object at the same time, because everything is just lasts a moment. So your moment of I-ness is, in that moment, there's no thatness. There's no world. So the main argument they would use is memory. So for there to be memory, there has to be a continuum between the seer who saw the tree yesterday and the seer who sees it today. To be able to say, I saw the tree yesterday, and to explain memory, there has to be continuum, and the continuum of the tree as well. But certainly they stress the continuum of the seer. So in various ways, they will rebut the idea, because remember, consciousness is sat. And the Buddhists are attacking that by saying everything is momentary. They're not attacking the fact that there's consciousness. They're not materialists. Buddhists are not materialists. They accept that consciousness is distinct from other types of realities, but they're going to say everything is momentary. Right, now, there cannot be discernment of both the mind and the object at the same time. If in a momentary ontology, if you only have one moment, consciousness can only be that in that moment, can only be conscious of one thing. So you could never have the sense of self and of other. Oops. Now he goes into this other idea, this other claim, this other thing. Right. I don't know why I just did that. Okay, now I know why. A couple more verses against Vijnanava Buddhism, and maybe we can stop there. Now, so then the opponent says, well, that mind, momentary mind, this is a really difficult verse, and I'm not sure I've really understood it. And I went back to it this again and again. I read the commentators. I don't want to say, because I'd rather say I didn't understand it. But if I really had to be honest, I say I don't understand it because I have to be humble, and I certainly don't want to, suggest that because I don't understand something, the commentators didn't explain it well. I'll take 99% of it, but deep down, I don't think the commentator, not just one, I don't think, at least for me, they didn't explain this. I wonder if you know what I'm trying to say, and I don't want to say it. I wonder if sometimes you wonder that, especially with the city section, they don't write a lot about the cities. And you think, and you want, the mechanics of it. They just explain, well, this city, explain what it is. But how does it work metaphysically? What is the Sankhya mechanics underpinning that? They don't get into that. So let's have a look at this verse. Because I'm not very confident about explaining it. Let me just leave it at that. Right. This is fair. This is easy, right? If you're going to the actual what it says is that's not the problem, but the confusion of memory. They're not actually seem to be talking about what I just was talking about. What I just was talking about, the memory issue, is a Vedanta thing, and I brought it in here. But look, if there was the mind is observed by another mind, right? So the opponent says your mind is observed, that moment of mind content is observed by another mind. So buddhi, buddher, ati, prasanga. And Patanjali is saying, if the mind were recognized by another mind, well, then you would need an infinite regress. You need another mind to observe the second mind and a fourth mind to observe the third mind. That's not going to help. And you just have an infinite regress, which is called ati prasangaha, an infinite regress of one intelligence being known by another intelligence. So that's fine. But this bit I just didn't feel I got it. Moreover, there would also be a confusion of memory. And they're not talking about the confusion I just spoke about, which is Vedanta Sutra, that to remember anything, there has to be a consistent observer. Otherwise, you couldn't account for memory. If everything's momentary, then the person who saw the tree 1 second is a different person the next second, and the third second. So how would the third second remember the tree? That person and that tree imprint is evaporated in that first second. The second moment, there would be a different person observing a different tree. And then the third moment, there would be a third person observing a third tree. You wouldn't have any memory. That's a Vedanta argument. But here the argument seems different. I get the bit about if there's a mind and it's momentary. First of all, there's a problem here because let's say there's a mind, it lasts for a minute, and then another mind observes the first mind, and that lasts a minute. And then there's a third that observes the second, a minute, and you have an infinite regress. Actually, to account for memory, you have to have at least 2 minutes. You have to have the first moment, and it has to pass the baton to the second. That means that let's just say consciousness. The consciousness of the tree is a momentary thing. The next moment of consciousness, if there's no overlap, why would the next moment be connected to the first moment? There has to be an overlap. If there's an overlap, you need 2 moments. Something overlaps, it has to exist in its own right, and then the next moment hands over its imprint to the next moment. If there's no overlap, then how would you have reality? 1 minute you would have an orange in your hand. What's to stop the next minute having a potato in your hand, and the next minute a jumbo jet, and the next minute an elephant? If there's a consistency in reality, then and even if it's, if everything, that first moment has to transmit orangeness into the next moment of orange, and that has to transmit orangeness into the third moment, and so on into the fourth. But if something's connecting the first from the second and the second, that connector has to exist for 2 moments. That has to exist in the first orange, and then it has to be transmitted to the second moment of orangeness. That's 2 moments. This is an argument. I'm just not. It's just that they don't make that argument here. They make it in the Vedanta Sutra. So I'm giving you all of this stuff, but the truth is, this verse I had to struggle with. The confusion of memory. So therefore, I just brought in the Vedanta. If you read my commentary, you'll see I kind of like, like when politicians waffle. And they you ask them a question and then they don't really answer it, and then they say something else. I feel like I kind of did that in this commentary, so I'm just being honest. Maybe now after 10 years, I should have another look at it. What do you think? And because after 10 years, also you do a lot of reading in 10 years. Okay, my friends, confession over. Right. Enough of the Vijnanavad. Right. Although it is unchanging, the chitti, not right, not chitti, apratisankramayas, although it's unchanging, right? It's unchanging. Tad akara patau svabhuddhisa, it knows its own intelligence by pervading the forms assumed by the intelligence. Okay, so somebody can say, well, if consciousness is unchanging, how could it be aware of anything? Because if you're aware of it, your awareness is changing. Right? So let's say my awareness is molded into the form of the tree, and then I turn around and I'm molding it into the form of the flower. Hasn't consciousness changed, says the opponent. And this verse, Patanjali is saying, no, it's the buddhi that changes. So the buddhi knows it has the imprint of the tree, and then turns around, looks at the bush, and now it has the imprint of a bush, and then it looks over here, and then the flower looks over their garden path. The buddhi is changing because the gunas are always changing. That's okay. Nobody ever said it couldn't do that. But consciousness is just, it's like the light. I always think of it as you get a light. Remember the old-fashioned, I know you've heard this before, the old-fashioned movie reels? When I was a kid in school, we had a movie once a week. That was a big day. British English boarding school. You don't want to go to one of them in the 1960s. Like you got caned and all kinds of awful things. But anyway, so you got a light bulb, and the movies, the old-fashioned movie reels, and it's flowing, right? So say it's a cowboy movie. That's we used to have cowboy movies because the kid that chose the movies, he was a John Wayne fanatic, and and every week it was cowboy movie. So he's a cowboy movie, right? And it's flowing, right? And each still is different. Now he's jumping on a horse. Now he's riding a da, 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 da. So the reel is changing, but the light bulb isn't. So that's the analogy of the analogy of. So the opponent says, well, if you're aware of the tree and then the bush, why are you people talking about unchanging sat? You can't talk about sat then. You can't say consciousness is unchanging because you're aware of a tree, and next minute of the bush, and next minute, and then Patanjali is saying, no, the buddhi is changing into all those forms. The buddhi is changing. Consciousness is just pervading. It's unchangingly pervading whatever is flowing before it. And I think that movie analogy works well to explain that. So although it's unchanging, consciousness becomes aware of its intelligence, its buddhi, by means of pervading the forms assumed by buddhi. Svabuddhi samvedanam, tat akara pato, it flows into the forms of buddhi. Drashtra, drishya. Should we finish? We've got 10 more verses. It's no point. Why have another session, my friends? I mean, I don't even know what my internet connection is going to be like. So you want to go on for, you can log off anytime you want, but let's finish. Right. So but now the mind, the chittam, knows everything. The chitta is getting it from both sides. Drashtra, drishyo, uparakta. Anybody that knows chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutras, you know the drashtra and the drishya, the seer and the seen. So the mind is colored by the seer and is colored by the seen, right? So the objects of the world are coming into the chitta. So it's getting all these imprints from the outside, pouring in through the senses, but then consciousness is pervading it. So it's getting it from both sides. We're getting what? I don't know. It is being influenced from both sides, from the prakritis pouring in through the senses, leaving imprints of sense objects, and consciousness is pervading it and becoming aware of it. So that's that verse. The mind, colored by the seer as well as that by which is seen, it knows all objects. Now, the mind, tad, asankyeya vasana chitram, it's countless variegated samskaras, right? The mind has been beginningless time. And every single form, dogs, cats, ants, right? All of the impressions are, the tree is standing for 100 years in the field. And every time it rains and every time the sun comes out, in some sort of way, even despite its immense tamas, those impressions are imprinted on the chitta of the tree. So it's got countless. Asankhya. Sankhya, the Sankhya? The Sankhya really means counting. The school of Sankhya, right? Yoga and Sankhya. So asankhya, you can't count them. It's countless samskaras exist for another entity because it operates in conjunction with other instruments. So the idea is if something is operating in conjunction with other things, it's not there for itself. Because if you separate those conjunction, it falls apart. So therefore, it's there for another. I don't know if you think that's a good argument or not, but a table is a combination of parts. So it can't exist for itself because it's just a combination of parts. So what is the self Buddhists like this, and they would agree with this. Buddhists would say you keep breaking apart the car parts, breaking it, the chariot, break the wheel, get the spokes, break the spokes, and then you get atom. And the Buddhists would say you can keep reducing things eternally. There's no irreducible entity. There's no subatomic particle that cannot be reduced. Everything is infinitely reducible. And they're arguing against the logicians, the Hindu Nyayikas. And Nyayikas would say, well, everything is infinitely reducible. How do you explain the difference in size? If my chair is made of an infinity of eternally reducible entities, and that big vase over there is made of an infinity of, then there's no difference between them, because they're both made of infinity, ever infinitely reducible entities. You can't account for size. Size, that says Nyaya, means at some point you get to a stop sign, you get to a non-reducible entity. Can't reduce it into something subtler. And then you put 2 of them together, 10 of them together, and then you get your vase over here with 1,000 of these little irreducible entities, and the chair's got 2,000. And that's why there's a difference in size. But if you say everything's infinitely reducible, you've no way of accounting. All things are equally infinitely reducible. You can't explain size. That's one argument. I don't know if it's a good one. But what are they saying here? They're saying that if something is made of parts, it can't exist for itself. Because something's made of parts, then you pull the parts aside and that thing doesn't exist anymore. So it can't exist for itself. So first of all, if something exists by parts, the parts have to be put together. And they're put together not for that thing. They must be put together for another. And instruments and the mind is an instrument, and instruments are for the use of another. 2 different arguments. If you have an instrument like a spade or a fork, a knife, it's not there for itself, it's there for another. So instruments imply a user and something made of parts, apart from the problem of self-assembly, right? Well, that's an argument for the theist. The theist would say, well, how do things assemble in the first place? That's not what's being argued here, but that is an argument, right? Who puts the parts together in the first place? But that's not what they're saying here. What they're saying here, anything with parts it's not there for itself, because it doesn't have a self. It's a bunch of parts. So if it's a bunch of parts, it must be there for some other. That's it. That's the argument. 25. Vishesha darshanaha atma bhavo bhavana vinivritihi. When you see the distinction, the visheshana, darshana, the darshan, you go to a Hindu temple, you have darshan. When you have a darshan of the vishesha, the difference between the atma bhava, between the mind and the atman, then speculating about the nature of the self ceases, right? We all speculate. Well, what is the self? Who am I? Why am I here? Well, all this kind of speculation ceases, obviously. It's just stating the obvious. When you experience the self, then then you don't ask those kinds of big ticket existential questions anymore. And that's obvious. And by the way, I really honor Jiva Goswami in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, because he says, until you've seen something, there has to be doubt. He's an orthodox Krishna Bhakta, Nishta, but no doubt, fixed, firm, primary theologian of the entire 16th century Gaudiya tradition. But he has the integrity to say, you know what? Until you've seen it, it's got to be a measure of doubt. That's very, because if you don't doubt, then you're a fanatic. If you don't doubt something you haven't experienced, some little tiny measure, you don't have to throw yourself into confusion every time. Well, occasionally doing that's fine too, Federico, ogni tanto. And then you pull it all apart and put it back together again. But you gotta, if you haven't experienced it, you've got to, what are the opposing, what's the Purva Paksha saying about my point of view? You got to do that. What are the Buddhists saying about the eternal Atman? You've got to absorb, because you have to really And, you know, because if you don't doubt that which you have not perceived, and you don't engage the opposing point of view, you're a fanatic. Fanatic is someone that doesn't want to hear anything that's going to rock their boat. You can't have a conversation with a fanatic, number one. And number two, fanaticism, where we know where that ends up. It becomes irrational. So therefore, doubt is not in and of itself a bad thing, provided it doesn't make you totally dysfunctional spiritually, because then you can start just doubting everything, and that's not going to help you at the moment of death. Your mind has to cling to something at the moment of death. You've heard me say this before, and I'm going to keep saying it. You're on your deathbed. What is your mind doing? Your body's freaking out. Your mind, if you don't cling to something, you're just going to be freaked out. Your body's breaking down. You're choking. Veins stop going into your veins. All of that, right? And then you're dying like that. Good luck. You're going to wake up in some God knows what body. So you have to cling to something. So you have to have and that's what your spiritual practice does for you. In one sense, actually, you could even say this: your spiritual practice, if you've practiced it, gives you at the moment of death the support for your mind. That's not the way we usually put it, is it? But let's put it that way. At the moment of death, if you've been thinking of you're not going to suddenly magically think of Bhagavan at the moment of death, or your Atman at the moment of death. Well, why would you? Your body's breaking down, freaking down. You're going to think of the things that are most important to you. Leaving your family, you're leaving your kids, you're leaving the dog. Who's going to feed the dog? You don't even know what random thing's going to come into your mind. It's not going to be Bhagavan unless you've really, really, really cultivated that samskara every day, japa, 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 japa. And if you're not a bhakta, jnana, atman, 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 you've got to be doing serious every day. Then at the moment of death, everything's breaking down. You have this huge samskara that you've been cultivating. You grab onto that. Your mind clings onto that. And that's supposed to take you to your next birth. Or in this case, liberation. If you're really 100% clinging to Bhagavan, you go to the bhakti realms, you're thinking of the Atman, you go to your Svarupa Vastanam. Take it seriously, my friends. So your doubt can't totally throw you into a place of cynicism and relativism. They're always all true. If you're, that's not going to help you at the moment of death. So think about the moment of death, do your research, do your svadhyaya, then put your money on your horse, whatever that's going to be, and go deep. Spend some time, reading this, read that, all right, Buddhism, Tao Te Ching, or the whole lot. At some point, your samskaras are going to orient themselves around a particular path. Go deep at some point. What are you going to wait for? You can chitta vritti forever on all this. You can svadhyaya vritti forever. Choose your canonical text, go deep. But little bit of, until you've seen it, your beloved Krishna, or your Atman, or your beloved Ram, until you've seen, a little bit of doubt is not unhealthy. Every so often, pull it all apart, and then start from the beginning. Okay, why do I believe in God? Okay, this is why I believe in God. Why do I believe in Krishna? And you put it all back together again. It's not a bad idea. It's like spring cleaning. Oh, at least I do anyway. Right. So when you see this distinction of the Atman and the Bhava, then you give up all this, existential angst. You got to see it though. No more existential angst. Is it? Will I live? Right. The kata. Remember the kata when Nachiketa says to death. Oh, some say we continue after death. Some say we don't. There's a big mystery. Death, you tell me. Who's better to tell me than you? Death, you yourself. What happens at the great transit? There's no more questions like that. Okay. Right now. So that point, when the difference is seen, viveka, we've had, that's 8 limbs of yoga, yoganga nushtanat, ashudikshaye, jnanadiptir, viveka. We've had it several times in chapter 2. Viveka nimnam, incline towards this viveka, this understanding the distinction. The ultimate thing in yoga is for the mind, the ultimate task of the mind is to understand the difference between itself and the Atman. Then the mind, kevalya prag bharam, is inclined towards liberation. Because it understands there's something greater than me. The mind understands there's something beyond me. Right, now, in that meditating on the Atma, Chidreshu, there are intervals, there are holes. Pratyaya antarani, samskara bedya. Because samskaras pop up every so you're in a state of viveka. Your mind is flowing, absorbed in the thought, not svarupa vastanam, that's near bija. But maybe these high states of sabija, or not quite. Maybe this is somewhere between dharana and samadhi. Mind is absorbed in awareness of the Atman, and then you randomly think of email. Don't you think it's just samskaras? Some samskara may pop up. So I would correlate this with somewhere between dharana and dhyanam, because the difference between dharana and dharana, these samskaras interfere with the flow of meditation. He doesn't say that, but I would have to say that. It's just samskaras in the intervals, right? Same if you're a bhakta, you're thinking of Bhagavan, and then ice cream. Somebody in Rome invites you for great vegan ice cream, puts a samskara in your mind, right? We know who we're talking about, Federico. The best vegan ice cream in Rome. So that interrupts your meditation. Right now, Hanam.
Edwin, it's an hour now.
No, I think I'll be okay, because it's I don't want to do, I'm almost there. If it gets to be, I don't want to do 3 bits. I'm going to keep going and hope to get, I think an hour and a half is okay, but we'll see. And also I learned how to compress everything, which seems to work actually. So let's quickly, well, not too quickly. Okay, so Hanam Esham Kleshavad. So to get rid of these samskaras that pop up and interfere with this flow of viveka, it's like getting rid of the kleshas in chapter 2. It's just part of the process. Hanam Esham, the removal of them. Kleshavad Uktam is said to be like the removal of the kleshas. Right? You do Kriya Yoga, you just work at it, my friends. It's not going to happen in this life. It's so obviously clear. Not for me. I wish you better luck than I had. There's no question for me. I'm spilling over to the next life, and probably who knows how many more. But I hope some of you make it. Right. And this Dharma Mega, everybody told Dharma Mega. The commentators don't have a clue what it means. Every commentator has a different explanation of what is Dharma Mega. What has everyone hung on about Dharma Mega? It's only used once in all Vedic literature, other than here. Nobody knows what it means. Why do I say that? When every single commentator has a different explanation, then clearly there's not one consistent explanation. And they're all struggling to figure it out. What people go on about this Dharma Mega? Well, the fact is, we don't know what Dharma Mega Samadhi is. And the commentators say interesting things. Any of them could be right, but they're all saying different things. You could take Dharma in read my. I don't want to go over it. Read my if you have my commentary. Read the about 5 or 6 different interpretations of what this Dharma Mega is. So if anybody says to you, "Oh, Dharma Mega means this, that, and the other," that maybe it does. But tell them, well, what about the other half a dozen explanations of what it means? Because they all say something different. It's not a term that you find. It is a term in Buddhism that you'll find, and the way it's used in Buddhism is that when you get to Dharma Mega, you never fall back into the kleshas. That's how they're using it. It doesn't mean that's what it means here. But so I'm not going to say anything about it, because you can read my commentary. I just list all the different opinions. But anyway, when you have no interest even in viveka, then Dharma Mega emerges. Prasankyane api akusidasya, no interest even in the great high levels of wisdom. Sarvata viveka kyate. That's the highest type of viveka. Then dharma mega. Who knows what it is? Which one of the sabija states? If it's a samadhi, it must have some relationship with the sabija near. It's not near bija because he's talking about viveka, so it must be a sabija state. But the commentators don't connect it with any of them. So do what you want with it, you know. But I can't help you because the commentators are not helpful. I mean, they give you, each one gives a different interesting, I would say, speculation. Okay. And tataha klesha karma nivriti. Then at that point, from dharma mega, the cessation of all kleshas and karma. Tada sarvavarana malapetasya. All impurities, all the avaranas, the coverings, impurities have been removed. Jnanasya anantyaj, because of the unlimitedness of knowledge, that which is to be known is little. I don't know why it would be little, because in chapter 3 it says as you know everything. Remember, this is sabija. When you talk about knowing everything, that means knowing everything in the universe. That means you're still using the mind. In near bija, you're not aware of. There's no jnana. There's no jnana in the sense of object knowledge. So he just threw that in there. It resonates with chapter 3 where he says the yogi can know every single atom of the universe, because why not? If you bypass the mind, consciousness can, even the mind, if it breaks free of karma, can pervade the whole universe. Just like the chitti shakti can pervade the whole universe, but mind stuff, manas shakti, chitta shakti can pervade the whole universe. Right, Eric? 2 more verses. Don't go. Wait. Now, tataha, from this point, krita arthanam, its purpose fulfilled. Remember 218? What's the purpose of Prakriti? Either it gives you boga or apavarga, liberation. When you're absolutely finished with boga, no more ragas, no more ignorance, no more thinking I can find happiness out there, no more illusions, no more illusions. You're thinking my soulmate is out there. I have to find my soulmate. No soulmate illusions. It's all rubbish. It's all all the illusions. When they're gone, my friends. Are you dreaming? I can't get to sleep. Oh, soulmate. It's all nonsense. When all the fantasy is finished, my friends, then what? It's fulfilled its purpose. Kritartanam. And there is a cessation. The parinama krama parisamapti. There's the finishing of the movement of the change of the gunas. No more gunas. Now this is near bija. Because they fulfilled their purpose. What's the purpose of the gunas? As long as you want boga and dreams and imaginations, that you're going to find some happiness out there, you're going to build your house on the side of the lake, whatever it is you're going to do, finished. All of that gone, then the mind then can be used for liberation, and Prakriti has fulfilled its purpose. Okay? And then he has this last little verse. Dikshana prati yogi parinama paranta nirgrahya kramaha. The progression of the object. I don't know why he puts this in here. There's another one. He just sticks this in here. This belongs in, the beginning of chapter 3, before he gets to these, somewhere else. I don't know why this is the penultimate verse. It's really the 4th chapter for me is. I have to say I have a little bit of sympathy with those who think that, maybe some stuff was added later. I mean, you can never prove it, but it is an explanation, and I don't have any other. It doesn't, all of a sudden you get this thing stuck in here, this sutra. Maybe this one's not so bad. I'll take that back. The Kshana prati yogi parinama paranta nirgrahya kramaha. So you see something at the final moment of change. Right, objects progress through time. So, right, so we say something's changed. Let's say we say something's gotten old. Okay, my shirt is old, or something's old. At a certain point, you say it's old, but really that change has been ongoing, 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 ongoing. The gunas are changing, and the shirt's getting old. But at a certain point, you say it's old. But that grand statement that it's old is really just kind of like a particular moment in what has been a long series of change. What is that doing as a penultimate verse? Somebody kindly tell me. But that's what the verse is saying. And maybe if we thought about it, we could find some logic to it. But anyway, but now here it is. Purushartha, upon liberation, devoid of any purpose for the Purusha. When you're near Bija, you don't need any gunas anymore. You don't need the mind, because the mind is only useful if you want to interact with the external world. The mind can't help you. I mean, in Asmita Samadhi, it can reflect Purusha back to itself, but you can't have an experience of Purusha. That has to be near Bija. It's beyond the mind. So Purusha Artha Sunyanam, devoid of any purpose for the Atman Purusha. The gunas, what do the gunas do now? They don't have any function for that particular yogi. Pratiprasava, they flow back into the guna, into their matrix. So the only purpose for the mind and prakriti is to provide objects of experience and the equipment to experience of mind and senses. And when the yogi has lost all raga, all kleshas, all avidya, no, I'm Atman, I'm nothing to do with prakriti. When I chase ragas, all I do is make karma and suffer, and vivekanaha sarvam dukkam. When that really, all of that falls into place, the gunas now, before the gunas dissolve, they become benevolent, and you get a yogi mind, and then the mind begins to meditate. That's also prakriti. When you're doing dharana, dhyana, who's doing it? The mind is doing it. So that mind becomes benevolent. It guides you towards liberation. But when it gets to that penultimate moment of asmita, now it has no more purpose. It flows back into the gunas, and now the yogi is Svarupe Vastanam, which is also known as AKA Nirbija and Asamprajnata. When the power, and what is that? What is Svarupa Pratishta? Here, remember the first verse? What is yoga? Svarupa Vastanam, right? Surely you should all know that, at least that verse, right at the beginning of chapter 1, right? If you don't know it, my friends, memorize it, please. All right, so what is yoga? Yoga Chittavriti Nirodha, verse 1, 2, stilling of the mind. And then what happens? Drashtu Svarupa. The seer abides in its Svarupa, not in the mind anymore. The consciousness is absorbed Sva in its own essence. That means consciousness is consciousness of consciousness. I'll say it again. What is consciousness conscious of? It's eternal. It cannot be not conscious. It's not an option. So consciousness has to be conscious of something. When it has the mind, it's conscious of the mind. And the mind then, portrays objects of prakriti back to consciousness, right? But now you've dismissed the mind, dissolved the mind, and therefore you're not aware of prakriti. It's there, but you don't have any instruments to be aware of it. Mind is in an utter nirodha state. What's consciousness going to do? Remember, it's sat. It can never not be conscious. So what is it conscious of? It's svarupa, its own self. Or as the Gita puts it, Atmanam Atmane Atmana. The Atman is conscious of the Atman, in the Atman, by the Atman, through the Atman. So Svarupa, right? So it begins with Svarupa, your own nature. The Yoga Sutra begins and ends with this word, Svarupa. Back we go to the last verse, and we need to stop because I'm afraid this is going to be too big, but we should be fine. I don't think I'll take. What do you think about me not taking? Or I could take questions and come back and just make sure this is recorded if there are questions, but maybe you're tired. Okay. How do I get down here? All right, my friends. So there now here. So now the gunas are devoid of any purpose, because their purpose is to provide objects for bhoga and instruments to experience that. So they are shunya, empty of artha, purpose for the Purusha. What do the gunas do? Pratiprasavaha, flow back to their guna matrix. Kevalya, liberation. What is that? Svarupa, we just had in verse 3, 1, 3. Pratishtha, situated in its own nature. What is that own nature really? Chitti Shakti. The power of not chitta with double T, completely different word. Don't get confused here. What is that Swarupa? Chitti Shakti, the power of consciousness. What does it mean, the power? Because to know something, that's a power. That's a Shakti. Shakti means to enable, to allow, to enable. So that which enables awareness is a Shakti. So now what is Chitti Shakti? What is that power enabling? It's enabling consciousness to be aware of its own nature of consciousness. And that is the goal of Patanjali in yoga. Bhakti's going to say, hey, okay, keep going. Don't finish. There's another higher consciousness. Bhagavan, what about Bhagavan? Iti Patanjali virachite yoga sutre chaturtaha kevalya padaha. Thus ends the 4th chapter on Samadhi in the Yoga Sutras composed by Patanjali. How does it end? The gunas, devoid of any purpose now. They did what they could do. They gave you bhoga for infinite births. Eventually you realize, I'm just suffering, flapping about. So now the same gunas give you dhyana and dharana, and they give you the yoga path. And now you get to the final stage, you don't even need that anymore. So now shunyanam, the gunas are devoid of artha, purpose. So what do? They pratiprasava, they go back to the matrix, and kevalya, autonomy, freedom, aloneness. And what is it? Svarupa pratishtha, situated in that very Svarupa we know about from 1.3 when it was introduced as the goal. And what is that? Iti. What is that? It's Chitti Shakti. Pure consciousness, conscious of consciousness. That's it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the goal of yoga, and I see no hands up, which is wonderful. So I'm going to quickly stop before someone puts a hand up, mostly because I'm worried about the length of this recording, but also because I'm knackered, as we say in England. Okay, my friends, I hope you enjoyed the, but mostly I hope this inspires you to think about your own moment of death and what you can do right now about figuring out who you think you are and what you think the goal of life is. And these texts are supposed to give you, answer some of those questions and give you some answers and give you some ways of thinking about what's the best thing to do with life. But I hope before you die, you find your path and go deep. Go deep. All right. And perhaps we'll meet then again for Mimamsa. I suppose at some time, I will be doing a Bhagavat forever. Once I retire, I'm going to just do Bhagavata for the rest of my life, because that's my canonical text, and I want to go deeper into that. And I invite some of you along to associate with that Svadhyaya. But I would like to, just as a dharmic point, from a dharmic place, do a quick workshop in Mimamsa and Vaisheshika, stick them up there forevermore. Then it's the Bhagavatam. Let me know if anyone is interested. Jai Sri Radhe Shyam.
Yeah, Shri Radhe Shyam.
Jai Sri Radhe Shyam. Hari 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 Bo.